Let's be honest, the moment she rejected you, you probably thought your only choice was to prove your worth, explain yourself, or somehow make her change her mind. But what if the most powerful thing you could do after rejection is the one thing most men struggle to do? Say nothing, not to punish her, not to manipulate her, not to make her jealous, but because you finally understand that chasing someone who has said no only teaches them that your attention is guaranteed, and that is where something psychologically interesting can happen. When you suddenly become quiet after being consistently available, she may notice the absence, not because silence is some magical trick, but because human beings notice changes in patterns. If she was accustomed to your messages, your attention, your emotional availability, or your attempts to keep the connection alive, your withdrawal can create a question in her mind. Why did he stop? That question matters, because rejection often creates an emotional imbalance. One person makes the decision while the other person absorbs the emotional impact. But when you accept the rejection calmly and stop chasing, you restore your own balance. You are no longer trying to convince someone to choose you, and that can be deeply unsettling to someone who expected your attention to continue. But understand this carefully, silence is not a weapon. If you disappear just to trigger anxiety, provoke jealousy, or force her to come running back, you are still emotionally controlled by her reaction. You are simply disguising pursuit as strategy. Real silence is different. Real silence says, I heard your answer, I respect it, and I respect myself enough to move forward. That kind of silence carries weight because there is no argument inside it, no accusation, no dramatic goodbye, no desperate paragraph sent at 2 a.m, no attempt to make her feel guilty. You simply step back. And sometimes, that is when she begins to experience something she didn't expect. The reality of your absence. Maybe she starts remembering the conversations you used to have. Maybe she notices that you no longer check in. Maybe she wonders whether you have emotionally moved on. Maybe she realizes that your attention was not an unlimited resource. But here's the truth men often miss. You should never become silent because you want to hurt her. Become silent because you refuse to hurt yourself. There is a difference between being rejected and being rejected as a human being. Her decision about romance does not determine your value. Her lack of interest does not make you less masculine, less attractive, or less worthy of love. Your job is not to convince someone to see your value. Your job is to live in a way that makes your value undeniable to yourself. And once you understand that, rejection stops being the end of your story. It becomes the moment you stop chasing someone else's approval and start choosing yourself. There is something most men misunderstand about silence after rejection. They think the silence itself is what creates attraction. It doesn't. What creates the emotional shift is the change in your behavior and the meaning behind it. If you were constantly available before, your sudden absence creates contrast, and contrast gets noticed. Imagine she was used to seeing your name appear on her phone, a morning message, a funny video, a question asking how her day was. Maybe you were always the one restarting conversations after they became quiet. Maybe you were the one making excuses to keep the connection alive. Then she rejected you, and you stopped, not dramatically, not angrily. You didn't block her to make a point. You didn't post something designed to make her jealous. You didn't send a final speech about how she would regret losing you. You simply accepted the answer. That can create a completely different psychological experience for her. Because before, she knew where you stood. Your attention was predictable. Your interest was obvious. Your emotional availability was easy to access. Now there is uncertainty, and uncertainty naturally creates questions. Did he really move on? Was I wrong about how much he liked me? Why isn't he trying anymore? Did he meet someone else? Did I underestimate him? Notice something important. None of these questions guarantee that she will suddenly fall in love with you. That's not how human psychology works. Silence cannot manufacture feelings that don't exist, but silence can reveal what was already there. If she genuinely had some emotional attachment to you, your absence may make that attachment more noticeable to her. If she enjoyed your attention more than she admitted, she may suddenly recognize how much she depended on that interaction. If she was uncertain about you, your withdrawal may give her space to think without your constant presence influencing the situation. And sometimes that thinking changes things. Other times it doesn't. A mature man has to be strong enough to accept both outcomes, because the real victory isn't getting her back. The real victory is reaching the point where you no longer need her decision to feel powerful. Think about how different that is from chasing. Chasing says, please reconsider me. Healthy distance says, I respect your decision. Chasing says, tell me what I need to do differently. Healthy distance says, I won't negotiate for affection. Chasing keeps your emotional world centered around her. Self-respect puts you back at the center of your own life. And this is where many men make their biggest mistake. They become silent for 3 days, 5 days, maybe 2 weeks. But every second of that silence is spent watching her social media, checking whether she viewed something, wondering why she hasn't messaged, and secretly hoping she will panic. That's not moving on, that's waiting. Real emotional detachment means you stop monitoring the outcome. You stop asking, when will she come back? You start asking, what am I building now? Your body, your career, your friendships, your purpose, your confidence, your peace. Because the most powerful version of silence isn't the silence that makes her miss you. It's the silence that helps you hear yourself again. And when a man reaches that point, rejection loses its ability to control him. Here is where rejection becomes psychologically complicated. Sometimes the person who rejected you doesn't immediately feel the weight of that decision. In the beginning, she may feel certain, she may believe she made the right choice. She may even expect you to keep trying, because that's what often happens when someone is emotionally invested. But when you don't, something changes. The emotional environment becomes quieter, and in that quiet, the mind starts filling in the missing information. This is not some secret female weakness. Men do this too. Human beings are naturally sensitive to changes in attention, familiarity, and emotional patterns. When something that was once predictable suddenly disappears, the brain notices. That's why your silence can sometimes create reflection. She may remember moments she previously dismissed. A conversation that seemed ordinary suddenly feels meaningful. A joke you used to make suddenly reminds her of you. A place you visited together suddenly carries a different emotional association. And perhaps the most uncomfortable question appears, what if I misjudged him? But don't make the mistake of assuming that every woman will experience this. Some won't. Some will feel relieved, some will never think about it again, and if that's the case, your response should not be to increase the pressure. You accept it, because your dignity cannot depend on whether someone eventually regrets losing you. This is where emotional strength separates itself from emotional manipulation. A manipulative man uses silence as punishment. A strong man uses distance as acceptance. Those two behaviors can look identical from the outside, but psychologically they are completely different. Punishment says, I want you to suffer because you rejected me. Acceptance says, you made your decision and I won't force myself into your life. That distinction matters. If she reaches out later, you don't need to punish her for the past. You don't need to act cold just to prove you're powerful. You can respond calmly and decide whether reconnecting actually makes sense. And if she never reaches out, you keep going, because there is another psychological shift that happens when you stop chasing someone. You begin to recover your own identity. Rejection can make a man obsess over what he did wrong. Was I too available? Did I text too much? Was I not attractive enough? Should I have waited longer? Should I have acted more mysterious? But sometimes the answer is much simpler. She just didn't feel the same way. And that doesn't mean something is broken inside you. Compatibility is not a courtroom where someone wins and someone loses. Two good people can want different things. Two attractive people can have completely different chemistry. Two emotionally healthy people can meet at the wrong time. Your value doesn't become smaller because someone doesn't recognize it in the way you hoped. That's why you should never use silence to create a false version of yourself. Don't pretend you don't care when you do. Don't manufacture jealousy. Don't suddenly become arrogant. Don't post your life like a performance designed for one person to watch. Instead, let your life become genuinely bigger than the rejection. Go outside, build something, reconnect with people who matter, work toward goals that existed before she entered your mind, and slowly, something remarkable happens. You stop needing her to notice your absence. You become present in your own life again, and if she eventually notices the difference, that's her experience. Your responsibility is not to control what she feels. Your responsibility is to control what you do next. Because sometimes the strongest message you can send after rejection isn't look what you lost. It's simply, I heard you, I respect your choice, and I'm moving forward. There is a moment after rejection that almost every man has to face, and it usually arrives when the silence becomes uncomfortable. You start wondering if you should message her. Maybe you tell yourself you only want closure. Maybe you want to check whether she's okay. Maybe you think one more conversation could change everything, and sometimes, underneath all those reasons, there is a much simpler truth. You miss her. There is nothing weak about admitting that. Missing someone does not mean you should chase them. That distinction can save you from months of emotional confusion, because when you continue contacting someone who has already rejected you, you may believe you're demonstrating commitment, but from her perspective, it can feel like you're refusing to accept her boundary, and no amount of emotional intensity can turn pressure into genuine connection. This is why silence, when practiced correctly, becomes less about influencing her and more about regulating yourself. You are giving both people room. She gets the space to live with her decision without constant reminders from you, and you get the space to experience your emotions without repeatedly reopening the wound. That second part is incredibly important. Every time you check her profile, reread old messages, look for hidden meanings in her posts, or imagine what she might be thinking, you keep the emotional connection alive inside your own mind. The relationship may have ended, but psychologically, you are still participating in it. Silence interrupts that cycle, not because you're trying to make her uncomfortable, but because you're refusing to keep feeding your own obsession, and eventually something changes. The urge to contact her becomes weaker, the memories become less painful, the unanswered questions become less important. You start noticing things about your life that you had stopped seeing. You become more present with your friends. You become more focused at work. You start taking care of your appearance again. You laugh without forcing it. You sleep better. And one day you realize something that would have seemed impossible when the rejection first happened. You don't need an answer anymore. You don't need her to explain everything. You don't need her to regret it. You don't even need her to come back. That's emotional freedom. And here's the paradox. Sometimes when you genuinely stop needing someone to return, they become more curious about you. Not because you manipulated them, because your emotional energy has changed. You're no longer standing at the same door, asking to be invited inside. You're walking forward. If she later sees that change, she may become curious. She may wonder what happened. She may wonder whether you have emotionally moved on. But whether she becomes curious or not is no longer the point. The point is that you have stopped making your happiness dependent on her reaction. And if she does return, don't immediately assume the story has changed. A message is not commitment. Curiosity is not love. Missing someone is not the same as being ready for a healthy relationship. If she comes back, look for clarity, look for consistency, look for respect, look for genuine effort. Don't abandon your standards simply because the person who rejected you finally noticed your absence. You wanted to be chosen before. Now make sure you are choosing wisely. Because the greatest transformation after rejection isn't making her wonder where you went. It's becoming the man who no longer needs to be chased, validated, or rescued from his own loneliness. You don't have to prove that she made a mistake. You only have to make sure that her decision doesn't become the reason you stop believing in yourself. There is one final psychological trap you need to understand, because this is where many men destroy the progress they made. She reaches out, maybe after days, maybe after weeks, maybe after much longer. And suddenly the man who had finally found peace feels the old emotions rushing back. His heart accelerates. His mind starts creating possibilities. Maybe she changed her mind. Maybe she finally realizes what I meant to her. Maybe this is my chance. But slow down. A message is not a relationship. A reaction is not commitment. And curiosity is not necessarily romantic interest. If she contacts you after rejecting you, don't punish her and don't worship the moment either. Stay calm. Listen to what she is actually saying. There is a huge difference between, "Hey, how have you been? And I've thought about what happened, and I'd like to talk about whether we should explore this differently." One is casual contact. The other contains intention. Learn to recognize the difference. Because your silence should have changed you enough that you no longer treat every small sign as proof of something bigger. This is where emotional maturity becomes attractive, not as a tactic, but as a quality of character. You don't need to respond instantly. You don't need to play games either. You can simply be grounded. If she wants to reconnect, let her communicate clearly. If she wants to see you, let her make a genuine effort. If she says she regrets rejecting you, listen to why, and then ask yourself the question most men forget. Do I still want this? Not does she want me now? Not did I finally win? Not how do I make sure she never rejects me again? Ask yourself whether the connection actually fits the person you are becoming, because rejection can change your perspective. The version of you who desperately wanted her approval may have been willing to accept almost anything just to keep her close. The version of you who is healed may have standards that are completely different. Maybe you now understand that you want someone who is certain about you, someone who communicates honestly, someone who doesn't keep you trapped in endless uncertainty, someone who can say what she wants without making you decode every interaction. That's growth. And here's something else you should remember. You don't have to become emotionally unavailable just because you were once hurt. You don't have to pretend you don't care. You don't have to become the cold man who never expresses interest. That isn't strength. Strength is being capable of caring deeply without abandoning yourself. It's being able to say, I like you, without needing the answer to determine your worth. It's being able to hear no without turning it into humiliation. It's being able to walk away without resentment. And it's being able to welcome someone back without forgetting what happened before. That's the balance. So if she returns, don't rush. Let action speak. Let consistency speak. Let time speak. And if she doesn't return, don't interpret her silence as proof that you weren't enough. Sometimes people simply aren't meant to choose each other. Your life doesn't become a failure because one person couldn't see a future with you. There are millions of people in the world, but more importantly, there is an entire life waiting for you beyond this one rejection. Your attention is precious, your time is limited, your emotional energy is valuable. Stop spending all three trying to convince someone to give you something they are not ready or willing to give. Silence isn't about making her suffer. It's about giving yourself enough distance to see reality clearly. And when you can finally look at the situation without desperation, you gain something much more valuable than her attention. You gain your freedom. The final lesson isn't about making her miss you. It's about becoming someone who doesn't need rejection to define him. If she rejected you, respect her decision. If she reaches out later, judge her by consistency, not excitement. And if she never returns, let that be information, not an insult. Your equation is simple. Rejection plus self-respect equals growth. Ask yourself honestly, what did this rejection teach me about the man I want to become? Write your answer in the comments. Your story might help another man who is silently dealing with the same pain. And remember, silence should never be revenge, it should be peace. You don't disappear to manipulate her. You step back because you refuse to chase what isn't freely given. If this message helped you see rejection differently, like the video, subscribe for more psychology and relationship insights, and share this with a friend who needs to hear it.